What's up, guys? This is the Starting Four podcast with our first episode. We are doing the Week 1 college pick'ems for the 2025 season. I'm Tabor.
I'm Thomas. So, first game we have on the slate is a Friday night game at 7 p.m. Central Time. Auburn versus Baylor. It's at Baylor. Auburn opens at a 2.5 point spread. Auburn's returning a couple of stud guys with Cam Coleman coming in as a sophomore and five-star wide receiver out of high school. And then Kendrick Falk. He is a top edge rusher in the NFL draft cycle this year. But they also have a transfer QB going to lead the Auburn Tigers this year with Jackson Arnold, former five-star QB coming from Oklahoma. Baylor has returning their QB from last year that started a couple games, Sawyer Robertson, and they have a returning running back that's up and coming, Bryson Washington. They have a couple of transfers that I know very well going to the University of Oregon with Amarian Winston and Tyler Turner. They should be starters or have a big role on the team, so we'll see how that goes. I have Auburn winning this game, covering the spread at 2.5. I just feel like Jackson Arnold will have a resurgent at Auburn, and their team needs to do good because if they don't, Hugh Freeze is on a hot seat and probably will get fired if they have a 500 season or barely make a bowl game. Tabor, what do you
Yeah,
have?
I'm just kind of looking at it from like past past years, not really their current players or what they've done. They're both pretty middle of the pack teams, like 6-6, 7-5 type teams. Obviously, playing in the SEC is a little more difficult. So I think those games that Auburn loses are a little more just than Baylor coming from the Big 12. And I'm also going to take Auburn, and I want them to. They're going to cover the spread, I think, pretty easily.
So the next game on the slate, it's another Friday night game. We have two good Friday night games, we think. We got Georgia Tech at Colorado. Georgia Tech opens as the favorite at 4.5. Georgia Tech is returning their QB from last year, Haynes Kings, that had a pretty good underrated season last year. And they return Jamal Haynes at running back, really good running back, a little small, but had a lot of production at Georgia Tech. They also got in the transfer portal a top receiver in Eric Rivers transferring from a lower D1 school. So we'll see how he performs in the bigger Power Four conferences this year. Colorado has a new QB at the helm, not Shador Sanders. We have Caden Salter coming over from Liberty in the transfer portal. Then they have two stud up and coming players with Omarion Miller that was hurt most of the year last year, but did really well freshman year. And then Jordan Seaton, former five-star, killed it his freshman year. I got Colorado winning and covering the spread at 4.5. I just feel like at Colorado, Dion needs a big game to perform without Shador Sanders and Travis Hunter. I think they get it done. They have a lot of good underrated weapons on the defense that will keep them in the game. Tabor?
I also agree with Thomas. I think Boulder's going to take this. Caden Salter, very promising quarterback out of Liberty. Dion's doing a great thing in Colorado. Without, I don't think with like no Shador and no Travis Hunter. Obviously, that's a big hit, but they still have a lot of stud wide receivers. And I do believe that like Shador being a competent quarterback, not necessarily the greatest thing to be at quarterback. So I think he's a very replaceable player. And Georgia Tech, they have solid games. They're just not the best team. So I'm going to also take Colorado.
Now we move to the big game on Saturday. One of the big games. We have multiple, but the early game in the Saturday slate, Texas at Ohio State. Ohio State opens as a 1.5 point favorite over the number one team. Texas is returning Ryan Wingo, Colin Simmons, and a lot of their defensive players, but have to replace some from the draft. But the whole headline is how will Arch Manning do in his first ever big start? Only starting a couple games last year, not against big opponents. But Ohio State lost a lot of guys in the NFL draft. I think they had the most NFL draft picks this year. So they have to replace a lot, but they do retain two of their best players from the last year's team and Jeremiah Smith and Caleb Downs. but they do have a new starting QB, a freshman transfer from Alabama, Julian Sayin, former five-star. I have Texas winning this game, upsetting Ohio State in the shoe. I there's a stat going around there. Freshman QB in his first ever starting game has not beaten a number one team. They're 0-18. So I think the stat stays alive. I think Texas shows they are a better team. Their defense is crazy. They just need Arts to perform at above average level, and I think they take the win for this game.
Yeah, I'm gonna have to disagree. I like Ohio State. Make that record 1-18 after Saturday night or Saturday. Um, I understand that Ohio State, you're gonna have to start your new guy, Julian Sayin, but when you have Jeremiah Smith on your team, you really just gotta throw it in a 5 yard radius of the guy, and he's gonna go make a play. And that also being said, the games, especially the big games I watched, not necessarily where Arch started, but he kind of just came in that red zone offense. We saw more of a rushing attack with him, less of not as much passing. Um, so I'm curious to see how he's going to play a full game, especially being in the horseshoe. Um, I don't know. I'm not sold on Arch Manning yet. We just haven't seen a lot from him. And Ohio State at home is a tough place to go win for your first big start as a college quarterback. So I'm going to take Ohio State, and I think they're going to cover their spread at -1.5.
Okay, okay. Next game, it's an underrated game. Not a lot of people are talking about it. The Syracuse Tennessee game. It is in Atlanta, Georgia, so it's not at home. Tennessee opens as a 13 and a half point favorites. They've lost their starting QB last year, Nico. I'm not going to say his last name, Nico. But so they have a new transfer QB coming from UCLA and Joey Aguilar, but they have retained their starting DB. That's probably a top five cornerback in this year's NFL draft, and Jermon McCoy. They also got a big transfer lineman and Wendell Moe Jr. from Arizona, so he should bolster the line a little bit. But with Syracuse was a decent team last year with Kyle McCord throwing the ball to their top receiver that did transfer to don't know where, but he did transfer. So they don't have their star receiver, but they brought in a couple of transfers that could make an impact this year with Jonte Cook coming over from Washington, was former Texas Longhorn, and then Steve Angelelli he probably is going to be the starter for them. I got Tennessee winning, but I don't see them covering the spread at 13 and a half. I just think the Syracuse head coach, Fran Brown, is an up and coming head coach that could make an impact in this game. And I just feel like Joey Aguilar hasn't played in big enough games to carry them to a 13 and a half point win over Syracuse.
I actually agree with this. I was going to say the exact same thing. I like Tennessee to win, just being at home, and I think the better team. But winning by 14, I don't see happening just because I don't know how much I can trust Joey Aguilar to make those kind of like big wins. From what I've seen, I haven't been too impressed with his game. He's an okay quarterback, but he's not throwing. Hasn't thrown a lot of touchdowns. Throws has a pick problem. So I think it'll be a good test for him with Syracuse being a decent team to get a good idea of what you're going to get out of him this year. So I'm going to take Tennessee to win, but they're not going to cover the spread. Syracuse is going to go ahead and cover that spread.
Next on the slate, we have a 2:30 game with Alabama at Florida State. Alabama has a new starting QB this year. He has been in the program for 3 years now, Ty Simpson. With Kalen DeBoer, I feel like Ty Simpson will be a good QB for him. They have also other studs with Ryan Williams, the second best freshman wide receiver last year behind Jeremiah Smith. And then they have a star edge rusher, LT Overton. That's a top NFL draft pick. Florida State, though, had a rough year last year, so they made a lot of moves in the transfer portal, and all three of their key guys that I've highlighted are from transfer portal, with Thomas Castellanos starting at QB, coming over from Boston College, Deuce Robinson coming from USC, and Squirrel Wright coming from Tennessee. I feel like Alabama is going to demolish Florida State. Thomas Cassianos was talking a lot of crap on Alabama and how Alabama is not the same team as with Nick Saban. And Thomas Castellanos is a decent QB. He's not a stud QB. I think Alabama rolls Florida State, covers the spread by over 15.
Yeah, I kind of like that. Both teams are kind of seeing new faces at their quarterback position. You know, you still really have to see. Obviously, with Castellanos, you kind of have an idea of what you're going to get. Just kind of a mid-tier quarterback. Ty Simpson, he's kind of he's yet to start a game, yet to really even play much. So, got to see what you're going to do with that. But I think DeBoer, I think he's going to really settle in this year at coach. I think he kind of now understands what it takes to be the head coach of Alabama football. I think he's learned a lot just being that coach. So I like Alabama, and I think they're going to cover the spread as well.
So we got next on the slate, one of the most anticipated games this today is 6:30 slate, LSU at Clemson, Battle of Death Valley, who's the real Death Valley Stadium. LSU's returning, Clemson's opening as a 3.5 point favorite, and LSU's returning Garrett Nussmeier, their star QB. He had a chance to leave and probably been a top 5 QB in the draft class this year, stayed to come back for another year. They brought in two transfer wide receivers that could really make a big impact on this team, Barian Brown and Nick Anderson. And then they also brought in a star corner in the transfer portal and Mansour Delane from Virginia Tech. Clemson, they don't go through the portal as much, and all their guys are homegrown, with Cade Klubnik being their star QB. Mostly, I think most watched player this year because of the Heisman watch and probably being the first QB in the NFL draft. Then they have a star wide receiver, Antonio Williams, that is making buzz and being a top 5 wide receiver in the draft. And then their two star D linemen, Peter Woods and TJ Parker, both being the top players at their position in the NFL draft. They have a lot of NFL caliber players on their team. So I have Clemson covering the 3.5 point spread at home over LSU. I think they're NFL caliber players and how they don't go to the portal. So the chemistry is perfect. I think it brings a level to their game. And Brian Kelly has not done really good at LSU or lived up to hype. And they've lost the last, I want to say, 4 or 5 opening games at LSU. So I got Clemson covering the spread.
So I'm actually going to take LSU. They always like to compete in these games, whether they win or lose games that they're not lose games that they're really supposed to win. I feel like they compete in ranked matchups pretty well. I'm personally not the biggest fan of uh Dabo or Cade Klubnik. You know, we've seen him since high school,
Hmm.
Cade Klubnik playing. Um, I think he's a little overhyped. I don't always see it. I I don't like watching him play. I don't think he's just like the most exciting guy. Like he has good numbers. Dabo, I think he does well enough where he doesn't have to get fired, but we haven't really seen Clemson be a true threat to anybody in the last few seasons. And I think LSU is going to come in there and upset Clemson.
Oh, bold take, bold take, bold take.
Yeah,
So
it's okay.
next
It's
on the
okay.
slate, we got it is old Pac-12 at night, but it's different conferences nowadays. We got Utah, UCLA at 10 p.m. The line has Utah as 5.5 point favorites over the UCLA Bruins. And Utah they have some transfer coming in, but they also have some homegrown talent. They brought in a transfer QB with their new OC, Devon Dampier, really good rushing QB out of the portal, coming from New Mexico. And then they got two star linemen that I've seen top of everybody's draft class with their own lines, Spencer Fanu and Caleb Lomo. Then UCLA, we all know the big headline this year in the transfer portal was getting Nico coming back to California, his home state. Then they brought in two transfer cornerbacks that I know much of. They both played at Oregon. Cole Martin transfer from Arizona State, and Roderick Pleasant transfer from Oregon. Both small but very fast, very good coverage corners. I don't know if they're both going to start, but they should see playing action in this year. And then they also brought in a transfer running back, Jivian Thomas, that I think is pretty good and could surprise people. I got Utah winning, but not covering the spread at 5.5. I just feel like their offensive line is going to be show a lot of people that they could be a top O line in college. While with the dynamic QB they brought in, he's going to run for a lot of yards, and I feel like he could surprise Utah could have a chance to be a surprise sleeper in the Big 12 this year.
Yeah, I also agree. I actually think Utah's going to win, but I also think they're going to cover. Kyle Whittingham has been, doing his thing there for as long as he's been there. Utah's has been the last few seasons so close to being a top 10 team. They always end up losing a late game to a team they shouldn't have. But I think starting the season, they've had time, like he's had time to work with his new guys, and just seeing what he's done over the last few seasons, I don't see it going any differently. I think they have a pretty solid team out there in Utah, and yeah, they're going to get the win. I think they're going to cover.
Okay. Our last game that we are picking, we got Notre Dame at Miami. Notre Dame opens at a 2.5 point favorite over Miami. This is a Sunday night game at 6:30. Notre Dame has a new QB in CJ Carr that won the position battle this year. So he hasn't started much games. He's played in a couple of games, but hasn't really started. But they brought and kept a lot of talent. They kept Jeremiah Love, one of probably the best running back in college football this year, and will be the number one running back drafted. And they kept Leonard Moore, a sophomore corner that surprised everyone last year in the playoffs, being a freshman and locking down a couple people. But Miami has brought a lot of people from the portal. They went heavy like they usually do. They have Carson Beck that transferred from Georgia. I'm not a big fan of Carson Beck. I don't think he's that good, but they brought him in. They kept Reuben Baines. If he returns to his talent, he is a top five edge for me in the NFL draft. And then they brought in CJ Daniels from the transfer portal from LSU. He is a underrated wide receiver. Didn't get a lot of play at LSU last year, but I think he's a stud wide receiver in the transfer portal. I got Notre Dame going into Miami and covering. I just don't think the home environment at Miami is the best it could have been, could be better. And I just don't think Mario Cristobal is the best head coach for Miami and probably could be on the hot seat if they have not a good year after having Cam Ward go number one and almost making an ACC championship.
I'm gonna have to go with Miami here. It's too early in the season for them to lose. Carson Beck, even though not the biggest fan of him either, not really impressed with his game. He plays in spotlight games. He understands what he has to do. Whether he does that or not on a week to week basis is another thing. But he's familiar with being in this kind of environment. Um, it's too early in the season for Miami to have their fall off. Every year, we see them go start the season 6, 7, and 0, and then they'll go ahead and lose a game. So I actually think this is the game that's going to bring the hype to Miami. Everyone's going to be now. They're going to defend the home, beat number 6 Notre Dame. Everyone's going to say this is the Miami that we're waiting for. And then by week 8, we'll be seeing a loss to an unranked team and their season's over. It's too early in the season for them to lose. And that's the only reason I'm taking Miami.
Okay, okay. So to end this show, we want to do an upset pick that wasn't on the slate. And going first, my upset pick this week. I don't see as much an upset with the lines being so close, but I got North Carolina beating TCU at Chapel Hill, first game of Bill Belichick's college career, basically, and they are 3.5 point dogs against TCU. I just think North Carolina, with the head coaching pedigree they have, and just he brought in a couple players from the portal and kept some guys. I think they could run the table on Monday night and beat TCU. That everybody thinks TCU will win.
Yeah, and my upset pick of the week is we got to go UTSA going into Kyle Field and upsetting the Texas A&M Aggies. Marcel Reed's trash. Like it looks like he's throwing a 20-pound dumbbell every time he throws the ball. He can't throw the ball. He's a running quarterback. UTSA is just a gritty team, like sure we haven't seen them in the top 25 in four years now, but I think they're a sneaky good team. Like they're not a team that you can just brush off, which A&M likes to just walk into games thinking they're going to be handed a win. They're 24.5 point dogs. Nonetheless, they're going to cover that spread because A&M can't. A&M's not going to beat a team by 24.5. But I think UTSA is going to go in there and ruin A&M's season just because it would be the most A&M thing for us to see. I'm not what's that guy's what's their coach now? What's his name
Jeff
again?
Jeff Traylor or Mike Elko?
Yeah, Elko. I'm not a fan of Mike Elko. That was just a hire because he was a coordinator for them prior. He wasn't on the radar to get any big name school head coaching jobs.
Mhm.
Was he Duke before or
He was
Kentucky?
Duke, yeah.
Duke. He did look solid at Duke, but I don't think it was just to hire. Like he's not going to go win you a national. I think it was like a Jimbo Fisher type hire.
Yeah.
Like he's a decent name, like, but I don't think he's impressive. Elko combined with Marcel Reed, they're gonna go 8-4 this year, and I think they're looking at this UTSA game, not too concerned, getting that number 19 next to them, and I think UTSA is going to come in there and at least give them a good game. I think they're going to win, but they're definitely covering that spread.
That would be a big loss for A&M early in the season.
We've seen it before.
We have seen it before, but that will wrap up our show. Thanks for watching the week 1 college football pick'ems from the starting four. See ya.
See ya.